Tonight we're going to actually try to install a new RAM battery. I'll explain what that is in a little bit. In this Watkins Johnson HF1000A shortwave radio receiver. Done this on my 8711A and it went pretty well. It works great. This is one of the three big weaknesses in these radios over time. Is one was the power supply, and I think I made a video on that of doing this. Of replacing that in this unit here. The second is the RAM battery, which is this little fella right here. You see, he just plugs into the main AF board, and that has a battery and a memory chip in it, which basically maintains all the system settings, all these kind of things you see here. Memory frequency from the last time you used it, as well as any of your channels that you've programmed in for different frequencies, so you can scan them. All of that, it needs to be backed up, just like in a computer. Any computer, they have a backup battery in there. Well, after a while, those are pretty good and have a durability of about a 20-year lifespan. I think that's what they estimate. This radio is 35 years old, so we're in the red zone for that. It works fine now. I'm doing this as a preventative kind of measure. What we're going to replace it with is this little fella. This is a 1643 replacement. It has two parts. It has a sled that we're going to install, and then it has the main board with the battery on it, and there's a memory chip in there, as well as a frequency oscillator, which allows for the whole thing to sync up. Anyway, so that is the overview, and we'll be right back in a second. Open her up and we'll start the process. Okay, and we're back here. A few little cheat sheets over here, so I'm going to read a few things to you. The new battery we have here is different from the original, what we see here in the Dallas RAM battery. Dallas RAM battery originally has a capacity of 220 milliamp hours, which that's a good long time, but that's not as big as the new battery we're putting in. Uses a different type of battery. It's a bigger battery that has 1,000 milliamp hours of life, estimated life. So yeah, you're getting a little more capacity with the battery. It's a different thing. Trying to improve as they go along. So This particular battery, the new one, is made and produced by a guy in Texas, David Briner, Kelly Joe _13 on eBay, and he sells them there. Not an official endorsement. It's just this is one of the few batteries I've seen that actually works on this. One of the things you'll notice when you sit in here is there's the power supply right next to the wall. We did that and installed that earlier on. You notice there's a little bit of clearance between here, and you have a little bit of space to work here because you're going to be prying this guy out with a screwdriver. You're going to have it on both ends of this and this. Important to keep in mind, anything you do here, if you're doing work inside the box, unplug it from the power, because otherwise you're liable to get a nasty shock. So you don't want to do that, and it will mess up your radio too, and ruin your evening as well. But anyway, so that's what we're going to end up doing here. This replacement battery, this is a relatively new thing. I know there are a number of people who are looking for this. There are three big things, like I was talking about earlier. The power supply is a big limitation. The original Condor power supply, as you can see, is bigger. It actually was subpar from the get-go, but they've updated that. And the original power supply went all the way to the corner of this board here. Basically, this whole perforated area here was covered with power supply originally. The new power supply is actually half the height, so you get some working space in there. Have a feeling if you have the original Condor in there, you might want to consider getting, you're either going to have to take it out to do this, probably to have the room to do what you need to do, especially when you're trying to pry and insert things on this side, because this is the DSP chip right here. You don't want to mess with that. But anyway, so you're going to do that. In this case, we have plenty of room. So the only tools you're going to need for this, really, besides my fingers in the way, are a small flat-head screwdriver, See, this was just enough to get underneath each side and pry up gently. And what I use, because there are some traces underneath this chip that you do not want to mess up, I use a piece of heat shrink tubing, which we use on wires to close them up and make seals better. I just slide that over the blade of the screwdriver, and that gives you a little cushion there. You have to be very careful. This chip is socketed. I'll show you the other one I did. You see it has the pins. These are little pins, and it's kind of epoxied underneath. It's a sealed unit, but those pins are embedded in the motherboard, and you need to rock them out gently so you don't bend them. I mean, you want to have if for some reason this doesn't work, you want to do something else with it, you can always use the original Dallas strip to put back in there if it's still good. So that's your rollback plan if you're looking at it that way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my screwdriver, and I'm going to pause while I go ahead and rock out the Dallas chip, and then we'll come back. So, and we're back, and here's the RAM chip out of there. Focus there. Okay. And as you see, you have little slots, little holes that those pins go down into the AF board. They're very small, and you have to be very gentle and very careful with those. Also notice, and what I was talking about earlier with the traces underneath, you see all you see traces in there. If you use a screwdriver, you can go and mar those, or actually basically break the trace. You could basically, if you scratch across it deep enough, you could actually cause it to actually lose connection, so it doesn't work anymore, which will make your radio so it won't work anymore. So be very careful when you do that. Anyway, so that's what we have for that. This is the next thing we're going to do. The next stage is we're going to put the sled in, which is and some people think that maybe you don't need it. I just like the extra clearance underneath it. See, the sled is just basically a little spacer. The pins go right down where the original Dallas went. It provides you additional holes where you can basically go through and you basically install the RAM chip, the RAM battery into that instead of the battery, instead of the motherboard itself. So anyway, that is what we're going to do, and I'll be right back once I get the sled put in there, because I only have two hands. So just going to show you the insertion process. I went ahead and lined up. You want to make sure this doesn't matter which end you put it in. It's not directional or anything like that. It's just to pass through holes into the AF board. But when you look at this, I can't get an angle on the side, but basically you have to make sure every one of those pins is in every one of those holes. And then you basically just press it down, press it down, press it down. And it goes down like that. I'm trying to keep it framed and still figure out what I'm trying to do here. There we go. Okay, see that? And that is tight with the board. Okay, so it can't go in any further. One thing about this, once you put this in, if you're trying to pry the whole thing out, say if you had to replace it at some point in the future, be careful, because these cross pieces here are not meant to be pried up on. They will snap. So you would have to end up pulling these out or prying these out on the sides probably. I think you can rock them with a screwdriver, but I think these are generally, because this is instead of a 20-year life, this is supposed to have a longer life according to David. You're probably not going to, the battery will probably outlive the radio at this point. So, but it is one of those things we want to talk about, power supply, timekeeping chip, as well as the main tuning knob, the VFO. Sometimes they get worn out and then you have to encoder, you might have to replace that. But that's only if it's got a lot of use, and I've never had to do that. So hopefully this is at least 2 of the 3 down that we can actually fix up. So let's get the chip out and see if we can install that. Hang on a second. One thing I wanted to show you before I put the chip back in there is a state that you might find if you might need one of these. If your radio it basically comes up and it doesn't boot. A lot of times a RAM chip problem can cause that. Power supply problem can all cause it as well. But if your Dallas chip is actually bad or has lost its life, what you might get is you get this, and voila, voila, voila. Yikes, that doesn't look good, does it? Remember we saw at the beginning it was playing and being functional, and all the asterisks and the lights weren't lit up. Everything was in there. Well, if you have a RAM battery that goes bad, you're likely to see this kind of display on your machine. It's one reason you could have that. I won't leave that on forever because I get nervous. But anyway, when we finish putting the RAM battery back in there, you'll see it powers back up normally. So one other thing, I noticed that the design from the original one has changed. I've got a second one. One I blew when I was going through and doing the original one. There's a little chip underneath there. I don't know if you can see it. It's not the chip that's soldered onto the board. It's a little thing hanging off that you see reflecting right there. Just has 2 wire traces. That's the oscillator. It kind of makes the whole thing work. Well, when I was doing the first one of these, I had to flip it around. I got it installed it the wrong way. So there is a right way, and it's based on the number 1 there needs to match up to the right way. I did it wrong. So anyway, it ended up bending that and breaking that, which basically caused my machine to do exactly what you just saw, even after I'd installed it. So in the newest design, I noticed that he has changed that a little bit, and now there's just a little silver thing there so you can see it. But keep in mind, one of the reasons you don't want to pry underneath these boards is because if you damage that, you basically blown the whole battery board. So it will not work at that point. So be careful. That's exactly what you don't want to do. You don't want to mess any of the traces up. You don't want to break the chip, and you also don't want to break the oscillator. So, and see it has the pins and all that we're going to install in there too. So I just wanted to show you that as something that might be useful when you're trying to do this. Okay, the key thing to keep in mind here when we start looking at these chips and looking at how you install them. If you look at the chip itself, you see there's a 28 on one side and a 1 on the other side, and no numbers down at the other end. The chip has that number 1 is the number 1 pin that you see that sticking out down there. Has to match. It has to match the first little dimple you see right here. And if you look really closely on the motherboard itself, let me zoom in a little bit. You see there's a 1. The 1, and then it's right beside the U5. That is, and the 1 right there. Yeah, that's basically it. That is the 1 pin. That is, you have to match that 1 and the 1 on the chip. So what we're going to do is we're going to line up all these holes, and then we're going to insert the board in there, and that'll be the third stage that we do with this to get it actually installed, and then you'll have a RAM battery back in there. So hold on, I'll be right back. All right, so now that took about 5 seconds. I get the thing to focus in on there. As you can see, the whole battery is now installed in the sled. It's down tight on both ends. 1 pin and the 1 pin are matched up there. So we have the battery installed now. And the next thing we do is going to plug her in, and we're going to turn her on to see what happens. Okay, I've plugged her in, and zoom out a little bit. I'm going to hit the button here and see what we get. Okay, there she is firing up. Boom, boom. Look at there. She comes back up. And if you'll notice, there are a few changes from when we originally started out, and certainly from when we didn't have one in there. David actually goes through and clears out the memory. It presets it to 20 megahertz. Basically, it's just basic settings in there. Now, what we've done now, since we replaced the battery and unplugged it, we have actually erased all the user configurable settings in here. I mean, you can come in here and turn things on. I want to make that down to 0 again because I had that before. Move this, go to 8 on that. Got a synchronous AM up here. Fast is fine, and I'm going to move this to 2000. What do I have? 2025. So 25 and 20. Okay, so my settings are back where they were. The sound works. Nice thing about this one, this is an HF1000, has the actual internal speaker. I've actually modified my other one to have that speaker in there as well. but it gives it so you don't have to actually have a speaker plugged in other than it's already in the box. So if I go down, since we are having an Aurora for the ages tonight and I'm getting nothing on shortwave, I'm going to go back to just a local AM station. And you see, we're right back where we were before. So anyway, so all we have to do now is put the cover on the case, put the 10 screws back in there to seal it down, and I have a RAM battery that is now new. And as you can see, power supply is new, RAM battery is new. The VFO, I don't need to change that, knock on wood. Hopefully I never will. That's one of those parts that's hard to get. So you have to scrap one usually, but they aren't that common. So, but anyway, so that's what we got. If you have any questions or anything like that, keep in mind, this is, you might want to watch this video a few times before you do this, because when this chip comes in, it does not have instructions with it. So that's this has been my experience installing. This is now my, third one that I've installed in 2 radios. Okay, so learned by my experience. These are priced at about $60 per unit. So that's what we got these days. But anyway, so I hope you've enjoyed this. Leave any comments down there, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.